Welcome firstly to DOC TV. A key theme of this year's forum has been multipolarity, and there's been a lot of talk today about the role that regional organizations like in Central Asia the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or the CSTO have to play in conflict resolution and maintaining peace and stability. From the perspective of a nation like Kyrgyzstan, what do these organizations have to offer? Is there not a risk that they can just become vehicles for the interests of and ambitions of the bigger players in the organization?
Even for smaller countries like Kyrgyzstan or the region like Central Asia, the development of global processes around the world are quite important. In our case, Central Asia located between China, Russia, perhaps to Europe, and global processes directly have influence into my region. So we're very much interesting to be able to listen to what's going on, as well as to provide our own voice on how these global processes touches the interests of my region. I'm not the first one who would say that the current global governance system not in a harmonious situation. We are observing here and there some problems, some tensions, not necessarily how to say, appeared as an objective part of history, but some of them which artificially created because it's not enough dialogue, discussion, consultation between the big players. Currently, there are three big economic players around the world. It's United States, Europe, and China. With that, these three poles of power, of economic power, continuously realigning, readjusting to the current status quo. And what is important that indeed de facto multipolar world will find a way how to communicate and how to create, I would say, new global governance model, which are really reflecting the changing world. We want Central Asia to be transit region for the trade, investments, and it can be done if China will be successful in its New Silk Road initiative, which would be supported by Russia and which would link through the land routes European and Asian part of the global economy. So we want that to be realized as quickly as possible, without mistakes, without wrong steps. So we will try to explain to the bigger players what will be the best model of their development. In short, the world is de facto is multipolar. Karl Marx was very right saying that economy is the foundation of all other processes. So if you look to the world economy currently, it's very easy to understand that this is at least three pillars where really big processes developing, and we have to reconsider global governance structure to build a world which will be more interconnected, more able to make dialogues, more able to brainstorm challenges of 21st century, be able to absorb the results of fourth industrial revolution, and to be more predictable, more friendly towards all players around the world.
So you mentioned China there, and that leads nicely on to the next question I wanted to ask you, which is about the potential of the One Belt, One Road initiative. It sounds, from what you've already said, as though you're quite in favour of this initiative, but I wondered if you could unpack a little bit some of the implications for Kyrgyzstan, for Central Asia, and more broadly, and where do you see the risks lying if this project doesn't come to fulfillment, or if it leads to, do you see potential for it to even lead to conflict in the region?
History teaching us that when Central Asia was a transit region of the old Silk Road, it was the most developed part of the world, where new inventions in science, education, culture, music, everywhere were just superior in the world in Middle Ages. Simply because Central Asia were connected Europe and Asia. So if it will be revival of this transit role of Central Asia as a part which connected to most important part of the world economically as China, as leader of the growing Asia and Europe, then Central Asia definitely will have larger role and will be a more important player in economic development. So we are very much interested that things will move quickly in the right direction, and the region will be benefited out of this development. So China is very serious. I quite often going there because I believe that it's extremely important that they will find not only good ideological statement, but real reasonable practical steps on how to execute it. And so I believe that China is going to be very serious in infrastructure development, to build new roads, new pipelines, new tunnels, and etc., energy corridors. But what is important that the development of so-called soft power, and it will be not supply but demand-driven approach in terms of projects which would be executed in recipient countries. So I'm trying to explain to Chinese that One Belt, One Road will not be easy to execute, having in mind those criteria, and they understand it. However, the application of soft power will be quite a complicated process. Hard power infrastructure development will be much easier to apply. It's already going on. But One Belt, One Road is not arithmetic combination of existing bilateral projects. It's much more complicated. It's a way how Chinese economic power going to be released, and China will be much more international, but not make others happy by only doing some hard power infrastructure development, but to be patient, to understand outside world, and to create demand which will be very received by recipients. On that way, to apply harmonious model to be next component of the global governance system. So in short, it's very welcome step by Central Asians. Of course, Russia should be a part of it, part of the understanding who will do what and when and how. And good thing is that currently there are a lot of debates and political statements about cooperation between Eurasian Economic Union and Chinese New Silk Road initiative. So it should be combination, harmonization of these two initiatives. And finally, Central Asia will be benefiting out of it.
Looking the other way for a minute, we've been talking for a while about the potential impact of Chinese investments. We also saw earlier this year a sovereign Eurobond from another country in the region, Tajikistan, and there has been talk of similar deals coming out of other nations in the region, like Uzbekistan, for example. Do you think that Central Asia has an opportunity now to establish itself as a potentially interesting place for frontier market investors, whether in Europe or the States or wherever, to come into the region?
Actually, if you look to Central Asian region, then it's not very complicated for the countries there to borrow money. If you look for so-called oil-rich and oil-poor countries, it's two groups of countries. Oil-rich countries, they have their own resource for internal investment, for government balance of payment. For the poorer countries without oil and gas, like Tajikistan and Kyrgyz Republic, borrowing is not difficult. Sovereign borrowing is not difficult instrument. For instance, multilateral institutions like World Bank, Asian Development Bank especially, providing very soft loans, and China, Exim Bank, both countries eligible for Exim Bank of China borrowing. So again, the interest rate of this of the credit instruments are very little, very low. So there's no problem. Tajikistan went to the capital markets, but the borrowing through the capital markets is still more expensive than.
So why do it then? I mean, it was a deal that attracted quite a lot of attention.
I don't know. I cannot answer for them.
Of course.
But one of the reasons might be that the source of borrowing should also be diversified. There is a so-called multilateral lendings, World Bank / Asian Development Bank and others, and Chinese lending, but maybe something else would be attractive. For instance, entrance into capital markets. And this is also interesting in terms of understanding how the things will develop. But before GDP per capita would be growing up to $5,000 per person, maybe this easiest way of borrowing would be from development institutions.
Finally, we're nearly at the end of day one of this year's Rhodes Forum. What have been your key takeaways from the first day? I understand it's your first year here.
Yes, actually, I'm here because of two reasons. First, to learn what people with a high caliber of their career are thinking on the current situation, including this multipolar world and the change of global governance models, political development around the world, etc. So I found some confirmation what I heard from other conferences, that global governance models should have to be readjusted, right? And few practical advice how can it be done. Second goal of my attendance is that I want to provide kind of Central Asian voice for people who are listening. So tomorrow I will have the chance to tell something more about my position as a Central Asian in terms of our placement in a global picture. So in that respect, both taking and giving a very good combination of this conference. And actually the usefulness of this conference is determined by the quality of interventions and participants who are here, and they are in a quite high level.
Thank you very much for your time. I wish you a successful rest of the conference.
It was a pleasure to communicate with you.